Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on TIP International Radio, where we showcase prestigious top professionals from all industries all over the globe to share their experience and stories of success. I'm your host, Leah Masten, and our amazing co-host, who has joined the TIP International Radio podcast full-time, and we are so honored to have her. She's originally from Namibia. She was crowned Miss Universe in 1992. Please welcome Michelle McLean.
Hi, Leah. Oh, it's great to be back with you again. And it's so exciting to have our guest here today, Dr. Dan Andreae, very special guest returning to the show, joining us from Toronto, Canada. He's an honored member of the International Association of Top Professionals, and he was selected as Top Health Educator and Advocate of the Decade, Humanitarian of the Year, recipient of the International Hero for Education, and named Professor of the Decade. Gosh, these accomplishments just go on and on and on. He has over 2 decades of professional experience in higher education and has taught 45 different subjects at college and university, and is an associate adjunct professor at the Renison University College, University of Waterloo, and professor at the University of Gulf Humber. Please welcome back to the show, everybody, Dr. Daniel Andreae.
Hi, Michelle. It's wonderful to talk to you, and thank you for your kind introduction.
Well, you know that it's very devoted, significant part of your life and career to holistic healthcare. That's what you've been doing all these years. So education and research has also been a part of that in the neurodegenerative diseases. So tell us more about that. I mean, it's a real mouthful, neurodegenerative diseases. What does that really entail?
Okay, well, it involves work that I've done, Michelle, with the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto. I was their first executive director way back when, and it was a great privilege, and it was exciting because we were building up an organization. You know, when I was first offered that job, I was the director of a health education agency, and we had just set up something called the National Eating Disorder Information Center at Toronto Hospital. And I was approached by Alzheimer's to see if I would be interested. To be honest with you, back then, I'm not sure I could have spelled it. It was so new, but then it gave a chance to come aboard and then to develop programs, some that became national beyond Toronto, a wandering patient registry, for example. We ended up developing a counseling program, support groups, a resource center. We did fundraising, awareness, profiling, and we also supported research. So it was like juggling many balls in the air, so to speak, but we established a society, and the main purpose of it was to work with patients, of course, and caregivers, because it's just as hard, if not more so, on caregivers in many ways than it is on patients, or equally so. So that was my baptism in that sense. And out of that, Michelle, came my perspective of holistic health. And every stage on the journey of my career has really added to that along the way. And if I think about it, I start with the brain, which is incredible. And we're really just in the very, very early stages of really understanding the mysteries of the brain. Because here you have a 3-pound organ that you, Michelle, and Leah, we could fit in our hands. And yet it's the thing that makes everything we do possible. What we feel, what we think, what we fantasize about, how we plan, how we react in the world, it all happens here. And as I learned early on, and it's amazing, about 100 billion different cells in the brain, and they communicate with each other through what are called, without getting too scientific about it, synapses, or little gaps. And we have about, it's incredible, my math isn't so great, but 10 to the 15 different connections every second in the brain. And for example, on the outer core of the cerebrum, or the top part of the brain, that wrinkly thing we see with grooves and peaks, has about 125 trillion of these synapses, which a Dr. Smith from the Stanford University Medical Center said is the equivalent of about all the stars in 1,500 galaxies in the universe. This gives a perspective on that. Well, of course, the brain is the initial center, but we realize too that we have other brains too. We have a heart brain and we have a gut brain. Of course, the brain up here that we always think about is about logic. The heart brain is about emotions and feelings, and the gut brain is connected to all of these two as well. Do you know, just a couple of quick points and we can move on, but if we look at the gut and how important it is, there are tremendous two-way connections between the gut and the brain. In the womb, they actually develop side by side, so it's not illogical to have them connected that way. About 70% of all our serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, is from our gut. The immune system, up to 80% of our immune system isn't anywhere else than right down here in our gut. So from there, we see the intricacies of everything in the body, from the immune system to the hormonal system to the nervous system, and they all work synchronously, like in a symphony that way. And so you see from there, we can branch out, Michelle and Leah, a little bit more and say that any health issue we look at needs to be looked at in real context and perspective, because it's not just biology and physiology, which are absolutely amazing, and we could do the rest of our talk on that, but it also involves psychology, our thoughts and feelings, anthropology and culture. It involves our social life and the community we live in, and it involves what are called social determinants of health, which means where do we work, where do we live, how do we function? Are we ill? Are we employed? All of these social factors get put into the pot and stirred around. So each of us react individually, depending on how all these coalesce together. But it's I think, selling short not to look at any issue from multiple contextual perspectives.
Dan, talking about the mental and physical health, talk to us about COVID and how it's been affecting people's mental and physical health, especially in Canada, because you guys were locked down for so long. Tell us about your experience of dealing with the stresses of COVID.
Right. It has been disruptive. It has been very, very stressful for everybody, certainly here in Canada. We've done pretty well on the vaccine front. There are issues. We have 10 provinces and 3 territories. Each province has its own program for vaccination. It really has hit our long-term care homes, where there were tragically hundreds, thousands of deaths that happened. And it's been so difficult for families to cope. So we are still under some restrictions. The border to the United States is still blocked in that way. And I think it's been particularly hard on people that I talk to, people who are alone, the elderly, for example, and people who've lost their jobs. And also the amount of changes required in terms of, if you have kids and the schools were closed down, how do you manage work and balance that with looking after children? It's very difficult. In terms of things that have changed, some are permanent, maybe some not, but of course how we work and where we work, how we communicate with each other has changed dramatically. How we buy in terms of online is another thing that is maybe a permanent thing. How we entertain ourselves has also been affected by COVID. So there's no question that the psychological effects and the physical effects have been very difficult. We know that anxiety and depression have increased, suicide attempts, opioid addiction and deaths, because we are ultimately social beings and we need to have that connection. Absolutely, we can talk much more about that, because I remember taking a seminar down in Boston at Harvard at one point, and they said the 2 things which are the most important for longevity are feeling in control of your life and social connection. There are direct correlations that way. So not to say that smoking and cholesterol and other things aren't important, but we should never, ever forget the psychological and emotional underpinnings of life. You know, there's a guy called Descartes, and he came up with his famous statement, "I think, therefore I am." What if he had said, as somebody said, "I feel, therefore I am"? We are feeling beings who think, and we should never separate that out. And a plane analogy, a plane has 2 wings to fly. One is our physical health and one is our mental health. And they are inextricably linked together in ways that we've kind of alluded to, but even more dramatically.
You know, Dr. Dan, you have you can hear in your being that you have such compassion for humanity. And, you know, you are a humanitarian and a hero to many that know you. You were the first executive director of the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto, which you just received the Lifetime Achievement Award for. Congratulations. My goodness, there are so many awards that we could talk about. You are the chair of the Patrons Council of the Society, honorary patron of Brain Injury Canada, chair of the Advisory Council of the National Eating Disorder Centre at Toronto General Hospital, and in addition, in being to the longest serving president of the social work profession in Ontario, a board member of the Psychology Foundation of Canada. Goodness, do you have any time for yourself, I wonder? I also understand that you're a special advisor to the Weizmann Institute of Science Canada and that you sponsor a neuroscience laboratory in your name. So tell us about your humanitarian work and philanthropy work and why this is so important to you to pay it forward.
I think, you know, certainly there are many causes that we can get involved in. And so when people get involved, it probably has something to do with them personally. Both my parents suffered from dementia and Alzheimer's. So that was a big part of it for me. I think the underlining thread, the thread that, you know, is woven into the fabric of my life is really around helping people or wanting to give them an opportunity to enhance their lives in some way. That gives me a lot of satisfaction. And we hadn't talked as well, May, later on, about my teaching. And something I love doing and love, you know, expressing myself and providing knowledge. But as I always say with students, I learn from you, you learn from me, we learn from each other. And we could talk about that some more as well. But really, it's about helping people and often the underdog, to be honest with you, people who don't have a voice or who need somebody to help launch an initiative, which I've done in various cases, that can then grow. So I like to take a seed and watch the tree grow over time. So that to me is very important. And when I get involved in a cause, whether it's philanthropically or otherwise, I always want to do something with it and get involved in some way, whether it's Michelle as an advisor or a contributor or something where there's something tangible there to hold on to and to watch them grow. And that's really what drives and motivates me.
Well, truly inspirational. I can really feel your compassion and your passion for what you do.
Dan, your humanitarian and philanthropy involvement is so impressive. But what's also impressive is your list of awards and accolades. You know, throughout your illustrious career, you have won numerous awards and have been recognized on an international level. In years past, Tip Magazine dedicated an entire edition of the magazine to you. You were honored at IAOTP's annual awards galas numerous years in a row for Professor of the Decade, Male Visionary of the Year, Man of the Year. This year, you were selected as IAOTP's Humanitarian of the Year. You will receive the International Hero Award in Education, Top Health Educator and Health Advocate of the Decade at this year's gala, and have appeared numerous times on the famous Reuters building in Times Square, New York City. Given all of that, what would you say has been the highlight of your career?
Interesting. Again, it depends on different aspects of my career, because early on it was working with eating disorders and then into Alzheimer's, and then my significant interest in the brain. And that was wonderful. That was a real highlight to watch that society build. The second part of my career was to have been the president, longest serving one, of the Ontario Association of Social Workers. And we at that time were the only jurisdiction in North America without any form of standards or regulation for social work. So all 50 states had it and 9 of 10 provinces had it. That's another discussion, okay, as to the politics behind all that. But I took a 6-month leave of absence from the Alzheimer's Society to lead this campaign, became president, and 10 years later, we were successful, having worked through 3 different governments, the different parties, and 7 different ministers or whatever, and many peaks, many valleys, lots of stress and moments where one is not sure it's ever going to happen. But by keeping the eye on the prize, and making that a reality by building coalitions and just not giving up. For some reason, in this case, I was determined, and I could have failed, but just to see it through, because it needed to happen. It was very important for social work and policy terms to be included in that, because there would be legislation passed at the equivalent of the state capitol in Toronto here, and social work couldn't be involved, such as deciding who's competent, okay, who's compos mentis, and the government would say, we can't listen to you, you're not a profession. Well, then we established that, so that was a highlight. But then again, the next 25 years we're teaching, and that was an absolute love for me, because I really enjoy when I see a student's eyes light up, and I in getting across information, and certainly when I see a student, it's always been the case with me, it's never just from the neck up, because when you see a student sitting in your class, you're seeing someone who has their hopes and their desires and their fears and uncertainties. And so for me, a key aspect is to create a safe atmosphere in class. And there's biology to back up how that can be done, actually. But the point is that if you create that atmosphere where they feel that they can come out of their shell and they can begin to blossom, it doesn't happen in the first few weeks of a course, but if they really believe that, and you're not going to get everybody, then you watch them flower and share their ideas, and because they know that they're being listened to and they communicate with each other. So creating that atmosphere, and to me, has been probably maybe the greatest, I feel choked up about this, the greatest contribution that I've made. And kids or students who will change careers, and they'll say, wow, I didn't realize I taught 45 different subjects, but I mean, I didn't know I could do that. Or just let them know that if they start out in something and it's not for them, their life isn't over. There are many other alternatives. And I've been through that myself, thinking, oh my God, I've got one choice and that's it. No, it takes maturity and experience, but just trying to reassure them and work with them was really big. And then the last part was the philanthropic part, Michelle, in terms of supporting different causes, whether it be student scholarships at a place called Humber College or the Humber Institute of Advanced Technology and Learning, or putting together a lecture series in a town called Sudbury, north of Toronto. I could have done something here in Toronto, but it's a big city. I think the 4th biggest city in North America. These smaller centers don't have the opportunity to have known speakers come up, hockey players, for example, this is Canada, or psychologists or scientists or politicians, whatever. And so we'll actually have up to 900 people in January, in the equivalent of North Dakota, maybe, I don't know, on a night out there to hear these speakers that they wouldn't have heard otherwise. And it's changed some lives. So doing that is really important. Again, sponsoring eating disorders further with a helpline, the only one in Canada. I could go on with some other ones too. The Da Vinci robot, which is a brand new way of doing surgery remotely. And so with this robot, it's less invasive, less time for surgery, quicker recovery time, less blood loss, less recidivism, and that has human benefits too as well. Whatever I do has to have a benefit for improving the quality of life. And that's so important to me. We know that when people are in hospital and they're feeling cared for, we know that they're going to get better probably more quickly. That may be an overstatement, but one study we talk about in my classes, if blood is taken from you, okay, when by somebody you want to be hugged by, let's say, you're hugged by them, actually the amount of white blood cells that fight infection go up on the spot because it's beneficial to our body, because our minds and bodies yeah.
Dr. Dan, is that oxytocin?
Yeah, oxytocin. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I heard about that, just how you can actually, they did studies in South Africa with babies that had AIDS, HIV, positive, and
Yes.
the more touch and care they got, the healthier they became. And I'm getting goosebumps right now because,
That's what I have right now, as you say it. Yeah.
oh my gosh. Yeah, it's just so fascinating, that background. But I wanted to ask you, before we go into whether you even have time to want to accomplish more, but I'm sure that you would love to still be doing something else in your life. But how does the medical fraternity adapt to this new robotic kind of approach to surgery? Do they feel threatened by it?
That's a very good point. It reminds me of, it was in 1905, a guy called Röntgen invented the X-ray. And the medical profession, I shouldn't be saying this, was very threatened by this until they found out they could use it to their advantage. And then it changed their perception and their attitudes. I think there's some of that, to be honest with you. At the same time, it does allow them to do more and more efficiently. So I think it's a learning process. And my sister and I actually sponsor at the Toronto Western Hospital, part of the University Health Network, which encompasses major hospitals downtown, the first ever in Canada Robotic Academy Training Center. So this is where doctors will come and learn how to do it. And the response so far has been very, very positive. And they're not doing it on the brain yet, but they hope to at some point. But with remote surgery, I've been told, it's not my area of expertise, that actually they could be in there in the 12th floor of this building in Toronto, and they could be assisting a doctor in Namibia or in South Africa to do surgery and actually take part in the surgery. So it just is mind-blowing and spine-tingling to see what is happening and can happen. And one last thing, Michelle, gets me thinking about things that are things I'm proud of accomplishing. I think we learn all our lives. Till our last day, we're learning. And so I was on a holiday recently, and I picked up a book at Chapters Indigo, whatever. And it was a book on the immune system and autoimmune diseases, which affect many, many people. There may be up to 150 autoimmune diseases, from diabetes 1 to osteo or rheumatoid arthritis, or thyroid condition like Graves or Hashimoto's disease. The list goes on. What we find, and it's amazing, is that about 50% of these diseases are determined by our genetics, roughly that. But if that's the case, what about the other 50%? They have done studies on identical twins, meaning they're monozygotic, meaning they have exactly the same DNA, 100%. And yet if you track them over the years, you find that the correlation with diseases is not 100%. It might be 50% with heart disease, a little more with another disease. So what accounts for that other 50%? And that's where the challenge lies. And that's where the idea of bio-individuality comes in, because Leah or Michelle or myself, we all have different ways our system incorporates things in this complex body, miraculous body of ours. And so there's something called, I'll just throw it out really briefly, but epigenetics. Epi means above, and it means above the genes. And we have our genetic code in each one of our cells, true. What epigenetics does is it doesn't change the sequence of our genes, but it actually can turn them on and off like switches. It's complicated, and there are chemical and molecular processes, but it gets affected by our relationships, by where we live, by what we eat, by our attitudes, by our social connections. All these things can actually change how our genes react. And this is ongoing. So that was part of my holiday, sitting and reading this book and learning new things. So it's back to the point that there are always things to learn. There always will be. And that keeps me going too. I feel, what do they say? Wisdom is knowing how little you do know, how little we do know.
Dan, so what is there that you'd like to accomplish still in your life?
At this point, I'd like to write a book at some point. I haven't done that. I've written articles and chapters, but never done that. So I've thought about that. And if I look at the health area, I think I would want to focus on, again, if not autoimmune diseases themselves, but around the importance of looking at any health condition, not in a linear way, thinking this is a symptom and this is the cause, but to recognize and understand that it's multifactorial. Okay, we haven't even talked about stress and how important stress is, to our overall health. It's a word that we use that gets overused, overgeneralized. Oh, I'm stressed. But what exactly does that mean? And how does stress actually affect the body and then interact with the mind? And sort of recognize that plays a huge factor in our processes, in flare-ups in certain diseases, for example, or just our mood generally. So all these things play a role, and the constellation, Leah, of what affects you may not affect me, but that we do know that there are things going on in conjunction with genetics that are all constantly changing, but that are affecting who we are, how we perceive ourselves, and how we act.
Dan, looking back, what would you say you attribute your success to?
Good question. It kind of blossomed later, okay, in life, to be honest with you. But having said that, really a curiosity, a desire to see and connect the dots among things too as well. So really to try to be aspirational in doing that, whatever it is I'm studying. If I'm teaching political science, okay, it's the same way, and I'll bring that into a health course, as well, because that's part of it. Policy is part of it too. How our healthcare system is structured, how it's working and how it's definitely not working. But very importantly, the absolute indispensable issue of emotional support, that is absolutely critical. And to separate that out is to do a great disservice, because it's so hard, because we can't measure emotions in that sense. And as a result, in certain quarters, and I'll be a little controversial here, if you can't see it, touch it, measure it, replicate it, put a number to it, it's not taken seriously. There are ways we're working now toward quantifying that more, and there's a lot of work that's been accomplished. But because it isn't as rigidly medical in that sense, doesn't mean it isn't real. And so how to marry those two, recognizing that, again, going back to what I said, Michelle, we are emotional beings. That's the bottom line, and things come out of that too as well. So really trying to combine that, teaching some more, running seminars, love to go out and speak to people. If anybody's listening today, be interested, I'd certainly consider something. So the last chapter is yet to be written, I think. But I also like baseball. I follow baseball, and our team didn't make it into the playoffs this year. The Blue Jays just missed out. But that and travel, collecting old signatures of famous people, I find inspirational. So I do that, and just try to balance life out, because that's what's so important. And it's so easy to go down the rabbit hole, that way. And also, I think when I speak, I like to take things and make them understandable for people. I've been to enough lectures where it is so far out there, I'm lost after 5 minutes or 5 seconds, but to make it real, because when I was teaching and am teaching, I've been referred to as a pracademic, a practical academic. Let's make it so it resonates with people and they can really understand it. One of my maxims is when the head meets the heart. That's when you get to students, now I see it, because it's relevant to them, and everybody's different. So to make it real is really the lodestar star and the crux of what I think I'm about, or try to be about.
Gosh, Dr. Dan, Andreae, it's just been amazing having you on the show. I've learned so much today, and it's just really insightful, just your industry, because it does seem kind of a very overwhelming, neuroscience. All of that seems like a little bit above most of the layman's heads, but you've made it. Your approach today really has, just inspired me to learn more about it, and I'm sure our listeners as well. So if anybody would like to get hold of you, as you say, you would love to engage and do more talks. So please contact Dr. Dan Andreae at iaopp.com/Daniel Andreae, or your own website.
And Michelle, you've been so inspiring. And can I ask you what your latest project is? You're into many, many things, and philanthropically and in terms of your passion. I'd love to.
Thank you. Well, I was able to move myself into, I was just saying to Leah, I spent time with my husband doing a talk called Success Under Pressure. And we actually spoke about 5 ways in which, people in business could hire us to talk about how to de-stress, the cortisol and adrenaline in the body. But we realized, and we would talk about 4 hormones that you can bring into your body. That's why I know the background to it. But we realized we weren't experts in the field, and it was very difficult to be taken seriously. Although we had come from stress and pressurized backgrounds, being in the beauty industry, my husband was a goalkeeper for Manchester United, so very relevant, So that pressure. So we spoke from experience. But then, as a motivational speaker now with COVID, I've decided to move towards. I've got a safari company in Africa, and I wanted to motivate raising funds for communities in various areas through my safari company. But that also went bang because of COVID. So not bang, but it kind of, obviously nothing happened for a while. But now I've got an opportunity to represent my country on an international platform to bring investment, tourism, and work on the film commission with my country. Yes. So I'm busy doing that. And in that process, whenever people come and invest, they always have to invest back into the communities. And when you do tourism, it goes back into, I teach people who come on these safaris what, different aspects of our communities, what help they need. So right now, that's my aim. Yes.
That's fascinating. It's how it evolved out of, when one door closes, another opens,
Yes.
You'd be the perfect person to do that. That's exciting.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's obviously we got to get the tourism going again in the world. And I just wanted to say that there's so many communities that have become even more destitute, and it's just become so sad to watch, because in countries like Namibia, South Africa, people don't get subsidies from the government. So the poverty is getting worse and worse. And certainly if there are no jobs, if people don't have an opportunity to sustain their lives.
Of course, absolutely. How can I stay in touch? Is there a website or anything to stay in touch with that, to find out what's happening?
Well, thank you. I'm going to email you. I'd love to email you, okay. and then maybe have another chat with you at some point, because I'd like to see, maybe where you could maybe come to Namibia on safari and actually do a talk to our university or something like that.
Wow, amazing.
You can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Come and have fun and what you're passionate about.
Well, thanks for sharing that, and good luck with it. Wow, it's a really, really wonderful cause. It is.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thanks, Dan. It's been very inspirational today.
Yes, thank you, Dan. It's always so good to chat with you.
Always, Leah. Till another time. But again, Michelle, wonderful to meet you, and thanks for your great questions. And it was more of a dialogue, which I loved. Although maybe I've spoken less. I think
that's what Leah and I feel like. We feel like this is a chat over a cup of tea.
Right, exactly. Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Yes,
thanks so much. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dad. Bye. Bye.
Bye.